What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and it's Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Honestly, when it comes down to it, Valentine's Day is the day when everyone basically shows that special someone they care. Unless you're single like me. Then you just call it Singles Appreciation Day. Either way, that being said, there's always going to be a certain sort of thing for this sort of holiday. And in terms of it, sometimes romance is everywhere we look, especially in video games. So, I decided, why not make a countdown involving my favorite romantic relationships or romantic couples in video games? And that's the case. That being said, yeah, you're gonna at least... Basically, this rule is, there has to be a bit of a romantic, I'd say aspect, or clues to a romantic pairing between the two characters involved. Which is really saying a lot, and one per franchise, as always. And before we start this, I have to mention, I have a Patreon. I mean, I've been basically doing all my efforts to try and make my channel much more appealing and, much better in terms of this. Trying to kind of make it, fairly big. And of course, I started up a Patreon involving different tiers, especially considering my own monetary situation. So, if you want, I suggest you can go to patreon.com/theautistic-scyther to find out more about the tiers and how to join. And now, without further ado, let's get started. Starting off first at number 10, we have Isaac and Jenna from Golden Sun. Oh man. If you already hadn't guessed, the Golden Sun franchise is one of the many franchises that Nintendo has not given any look to in recent years. Looking at you, mother franchise. But that being said, that doesn't mean this franchise has a lot of ideas for the shipping well. And honestly, when it comes down to it, this franchise really does say a lot. And while I do like the entire pairing of Isaac and Mia, yeah, as it turns out, Isaac and Jenna is an interesting pairing when it comes down to it. As from the very first game, Jenna is basically one of Isaac's childhood friends, alongside Garrett when they were growing up in the town of Vale, and as such, basically the entire thing started as they scaled up Mount Aleph alongside the sage Kraden in order to discover the different synergy stars. And as such, and as a result, Jenna and Kraden were eventually captured or kidnapped by Satoros and Minardi in order to get all of the stars. And as such, it more or less starts off the entirety of the first game. But that being said, this leads into the sequel, Golden Sun: The Lost Age, which basically focuses on Jenna's Jenna's travels, or Jenna's journey, alongside, again, her brother Felix, who was thought to have died in a flood from the very start of the first game, who was eventually revealed to be alive and serving as and working alongside Saturos and Minardi. And as such, Jenna basically had to grow up very quickly and more or less fight alongside her brother, as well as several other synergy units, as well as or adepts, in order to basically survive the journey. And basically, she is seen as a sort of damsel in distress in the first game, but she really comes into her own. Especially when Isaac and his party are basically kind of come into conflict with her party as near the middle or end of the second game. Keep in mind I have not played through Lost Age yet. That being said, honestly, this does end up with a happy ending, as essentially Isaac and Jenna end up getting married, and by Golden Sun Dark Dawn, they end up having a son in Matthew, which, honestly, this is the first married couple on this list, and it's a perfect direction that this is going in. So, yeah, you have that. Really says a lot. Moving on next at number 9, you have Iskin and Polina from Pokemon Legends Arceus, or Pokemon Legends Arceus, if I should say. And, alright, speaking of characters who possibly end up getting married, honestly, the Pokemon franchise doesn't have that many relationships, especially the 2 Legends games. And keep in mind, I was considering, this was before Legends ZA came out and gave us the likes of Jacinth and Laban, who may have a bit of a relationship themselves. However, that being said, Legends Arceus basically gave us 2 characters that are kind of an interesting, who basically are one of the few characters that are seen as having a romantic relationship. And they're both members of different clans. Those being Iskin of the Diamond Clan, and who is more of a quiet and kind man who more or less is afraid of ghosts, due to him taking care of the ride Pokemon Basculegion, which is part ghost. Don't know where that was going. And of course, Polina of the Pearl Clan, who basically takes care of who originally took care of the original Noble Lord, Hisuian Arcanine. That being said, when it comes down to it, Iskin and Polina are both kind of interesting characters. And when you first reach the Cobalt Coastlands and learn about the plight of the previous Lord's death, as well as the 2 Hisuian Growlithe, one of which being the son of the previous Lord, well, you try to find some way to help her out, and she basically suggests Iskin. And yeah, eventually, once you go down to helping out there, you help out Iskin with his Basculegion issue by creating food, Basculegion's favorite food, in order to help it out, in order to gain the ability to summon it. Unfortunately, the Misfortune Sisters have to flat out throw a wrench in the situation by kidnapping one of the two Hisuian Growlithe in order to summon the noble Hisuian Arcanine. Yeah. That being said, and as such, Polina, the son of the noble Hisuian Arcanine, basically ended up heading off to more or less rescue its friend, with Polina and Iskin following behind. And naturally, Polina obviously shows some notable trust in Iskin, to the point that there are obvious hints of a romantic relationship between the two of them. Which, honestly, the star-crossed lovers thing is kind of an amazing trope that I wouldn't think Pokemon would have essentially shown. That being said, honestly, it's pretty solid, especially when you considering that it was Iskin who initially rescued Paulina from drowning some time before the events of the game. And as such, a romantic relationship ended up blossoming. And even at the end of the game, it's implied that Iskin and Paulina eventually ended up getting married, which is a perfect way to bring the Diamond and Pearl clans together, aside of a certain other pairing, which has not yet been mentioned. So yeah, fair to say. Hi. Moving on next, at number 8, we have Nico and Kate from Grand Theft Auto 4. Oh boy, Grand Theft Auto. Yeah. Like Pokemon, GTA is not one of those franchises where you'd expect romance to blossom. And, I mean, for a while, I considered GTA 5's pairing of Michael DeSanta and his wife, but yeah, there's not much there. And even with that, there's also the double pairing of CJ and Catalina and Claude Speed and Catalina from San Andreas in 3. However, I think the best relationship has to come courtesy of GTA 4. And especially the protagonist, Nico Bellic, who basically arrives in Liberty City from an unnamed Serbian village while searching for someone who sold out his entire platoon. And as such, he ends up meeting a lot of characters, including one character named Michelle. Yeah, not gonna point this one out. Michelle's not going to be mentioned because she ends up betraying his trust later in the game. However, he ends up on the rebound when he eventually meets Packy McCreary's sister, Kate McCreary, who, unlike Packy, is, well, not only a nice girl, but she's willing to stand by his side no matter what. And they eventually end up building a rapport with each other. Granted, for those that have played through GTA 4, you know this differentiates near the end of the game, and it can either end in one of two ways. You either end up taking the deal to the point that Kate McCreary ends up leaving Nico and not accompanying him to Roman's wedding, or you take revenge on Dimitri and Kate McCreary ends up dying at Roman's wedding. Either way, it's a beautiful relationship and that ends up tragically. Really says a lot. This will be continued in part 2.